Hey guys, Jacob here. This is another 1.8.3 build video for the Division. This is going to be going over my new PvE Striker build. I decided to make this build mostly because a bunch of my friends have been asking me what the best way to run Strikers in PvE, and what's a good build to use it for Flawless or the Legendary missions. Yes, I know Nomad is here, which that's one I highly recommend, but if you don't want to use Nomad and you still want to use Striker, since I think it's probably one of the best high damage builds you can use for PvE still, so I'll get right into it so you guys can see. I'm using the Lightweight M4, the LVOA, the Sawed-Off Shotgun, and 6P Striker. I'll get right into the weapons so you guys can see the talents. The Lightweight M4 has Destructive, Deadly, and Ferocious. You could use Destructive, Deadly, and Predatory or Responsive, but I chose Ferocious mostly to get the damage against elite in-named enemies, because you're going to be fighting elite enemies if you're doing Legendary or Incursions, so that's why that's currently on there. Destructive to get rid of the armor that are on NPCs, and Deadly for the extra crit damage. Also, I suggest using ARs, not SMGs, mostly because the enemy armor damage and that affects NPCs very well. So you can pretty much just shred through NPCs like they're literally nothing. The mods I'm using on this are the Rugged Reflex Sight, which has crit chance, crit hit damage, and headshot damage. Yes, I know you could use something like the C79 or the Pro, but I'll explain that later why I'm using that. The Extended Mag has crit chance, magazine size, and rate of fire. The Small Grip has crit damage, stability, and optimal range. The FDE Suppressor has crit damage, crit chance, and headshot damage. The secondary I'm using, which is my, I guess you could say healer type gun, has sustained, self-preserved, and predatory, and the mods on this are a C79 scope with crit damage, crit chance, and optimal range. Extended Mag with crit chance, magazine size, and rate of fire. Small Grip with crit damage, stability, and optimal range. And FDE Suppressor with crit damage, crit chance, and stability. You could use something like this one, but this one's actually currently on the other AR, so that's why it's not on there, so I'm left with this one. Now, the Sawed-Off Shotgun, which isn't really that important for PvE, but I guess it is a tiny bit. Self-preserved, predatory, and determined. If you want to get your ult back a little bit quicker, I suggest using something like this, because you're going to be in PvE and you can just peek around a corner and headshot NPCs that are a lot further away. But you could use both if you want, but I prefer the 1911 for PvE and PvP lately, because you have determined and cool head and get your ult faster. But predatory is on this, so when you smack someone, you do get determined and predatory, so that's pretty good too. Now, the gear I'm using the Classified Striker, as you can see. Roll for stamina, enemy armor damage, health, and ammo capacity. The mods on this are damage to elites by 4%. It was a pain in the ass finding these. I can't remember where I found them. I think one of the vendors was selling them this week, actually. But that's how I finally got these, so now I can finally make this build. The mods I'm using, as I said, are the damage to elites. You want to get damage to elites. If you can't, try to get health or something, or get damage to elites by crafting them, or just go around on a lower character and see if you can find them, or just go into the vendor and just look for purple mods that they're selling and buy them that way. Now, the mask I'm using, which has firearms, enemy armor damage, and burn resistance. Enemy armor damage is very important to the NPCs because you're going to be using that to shred through their armor. The mod on this is a damage to elite mod, as always. The knee pads I'm using are crit hit damage, increased kill XP, bleed resistance, burn, and firearms. It has a damage to elites and a pulse crit hit chance mod. Now the backpack has crit damage, stamina, ammo capacity, and a damage to elites with 2 pulse crit hit chance mods. Now the gloves are rolled for enemy armor damage, crit damage, and assault rifle damage, and roll for firearms. I wish I had crit chance, because crit damage is pretty high in this build, so I wish I had a little bit more crit chance. But I currently don't have gloves, so I can roll for these. These are the ones I have to deal with, unless I could flip assault rifle and put crit chance, but then I'd be losing assault rifle damage. But if you really want that crit chance, you can do that, but I suggest not doing it. Now the holster I'm using has crit chance in all stats with a pulse crit chance mod. Now I'll explain why I'm running on the scope. As you guys see, it is a rugged reflex, which only gives you crit chance and crit damage. I'll tell you guys now that you can get more crit hit damage, but personally I don't think it's really worth it on this version of the build I'm running, because I don't have the rolls and the gloves that I need, and your enemy armor damage is like on your mask, for example, and on your gloves, so you're losing crit hit damage or crit chance depending on which one you want to go for. But I'll tell you guys now the abilities I'm using. The Pulse mod. The Pulse mods are for the Pulse, which gives me additional 15% crit chance against NPCs and players. I'm using the Support Station, which has life support, mostly because if you're down, this can res you. The Immune Station can res you, but I've been using this mostly just for PvE, like running Lexington. So if you do get down, this can res you. And I've been using this build a lot solo play, just by running back and forth through Lexington and killing NPCs. It's pretty easy. But if you're with a group, I suggest running this with a reclaimer, or having a reclaimer in your group. That way you don't really have to run a box. You could run something like the turret, like the active sensor that just attacks NPCs, and basically you can just throw that out and it can distract the bosses or the NPCs or the hunters, whatever you're fighting, and kill them a little bit easier. The talents I'm using on this build, which is Adrenaline for the 7 seconds immunity from status effects, it goes for Fire, Bleed, Burn, mostly from the cleaners. I'm using Steady Hands. Mostly when you go into cover, you can actually just use this stability by 25% and just beam NPCs, or you could use this on players too. The next one I'm using is Strike Back. When you're almost dead, you can hit your booster shot or your box, so we can drop it down and it can save your ass. The next one is Combat Medic. So when you're near your teammate, you can hit this and it will heal your teammate, and also that way you don't have to constantly drop a box. You can just hit your med kit and heal them. One thing I would suggest using is Precision, which when you headshot a hostile, you pulse them for 10 seconds. So if you want to flip Strike Back with Precision, you could do that also. Or you could use something like Shock and Awe when you suppress a hostile, increase movement speed by 10%, or by 25%, my bad, for 10 seconds. But it's all in your preference, whatever you use. I'll get into the character sheet and show you guys why the crit chance is so low. As you guys can see, it is at 17%. It's usually at 20%, but since I don't have a scope or roll on the mask or the gloves, you're losing a decent amount of crit chance. So I decided to go with that scope, and that gives you the 17% crit chance. And that way you have a decent amount, not a crazy amount, but you can still hit NPCs pretty hard, and you have additional 115% crit damage. Now I'll get into the main things about this build. So you guys can see damage to elite is 30%, which is pretty awesome. The enemy armor damage is 73%, and the threat is negative 47%. So you can basically just rip through NPCs with this build, and especially you got Ferocious and Destructive, you're going to be shredding through this, and especially if your teammates have builds on this that are very similar, you guys will just rip through missions like they're nothing. Now I'll get into the max health. As you guys can see, 317,000 is kind of low. Usually I'm around 330 with most of my builds. But lately I've gone a little bit lower because I've been investing in a little bit more firearms. But if you want to flip this out with, say, you could have a little bit more stamina, just roll a different piece for stamina, and you could have up to around 7,000 stamina if you really want to have that little bit more toughness. But it's like I said, it's all in your preference. That's really about it for the build, guys. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I hope this helped. I think this is one of the best ways to run PvE Striker and run through Lexington or Amherst or whatever you're running through. But this is my take on it. As always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. I hope you all enjoyed.